When Beth called me and asked me if I could speak to you, she said, it would be nice if you could mention something about a beloved community, because that's where you are. And this is the last Sunday of your stewardship drive, or commitment, or whatever words you use. And I think we all use them slightly differently, and we all hear them slightly differently independent of how we mean them. So what I thought I would do is talk about a different kind of community, and you probably all know the story. I can recall several years ago dropping in on 3 women who were having a study, and they volunteered that one of them really liked parables. And one of them really hated parables. Why didn't they just say what they meant? Why did they have to disguise it as a parable? And the third woman said, well, you know, I like them both. Jesus taught in parables, and Jesus is not the only one who taught in parables. We find them in all the world's great religions. Unfortunately, sometimes there are people who follow them and say they are all literalistic. No. But I'm going to read you out of the Message, which was a different English approach, the story that is in this book called The Story of the Lost Son. You probably know it as the prodigal son. And I think it is the story of the prodigals, because all 3 of the main characters are prodigal in their own way. But they make up a community. So the scripture is this. This is Jesus speaking. There was once a man who had 2 sons. The younger said to his father, I want right now what's coming to me. If you know anything about the culture, first of all, younger sons didn't get as much as the older sons. And it was really bad form to ask for what was coming to you while your father was still alive. Well, Jesus sort of skips over that, and all the scripture says, so the father divided the property between them. It wasn't long before the younger son packed up his bags and left for a distant country. Of course he did. Of course he did. Who would want to stick around if you dishonored your family and had not paid proper attention to what that community, that family, needed within its community? You'd run into people who'd known you since you were knee-high to a grasshopper, and they would know all the missteps you took. In a church setting, I think about how many times I made it to the refreshment table at wedding receptions. They actually had adults who watched a few of us. And we go to that end of the table, and we circle around, and we come to that end of the table. Those are very mild things. But if you stayed around, you'd probably run into people who remembered what you were like as a teenager, when you were exploring other things, when you were not necessarily following the rules. And so it's really good that when he packed up his bags and he left for a far country. That way, you know what this part of the country is called? This is called the none zone. You've probably heard that. If you go to the hospital and you put down your religious preference, none. And I think that's largely because so many of us, and I include myself, came from somewhere else. That somewhere else was filled with people who knew all of our history. It's one of the reasons church attendance is so high, because you have to be seen in certain parts of the country, like the South. And you have big churches, and you can be almost anonymous. It's really hard to be not anonymous here, because you all know each other pretty well. And that's, I think, a very good and positive thing. Well, he packed up his bags, and there it says, undisciplined and dissipated, he wasted everything he had. How many people who win the lottery find that they are bankrupt very soon? You've read about it. I haven't experienced that myself. After he'd gone through all of his money, there was a bad famine in the land. I think 2008, when the bottom fell out, will give us some idea of that. And he began to hurt. He signed on with a citizen who then assigned him to the fields to slop the pigs. Now, if you're a Jewish boy, and pigs, hogs, are considered unclean, that was about the lowest thing that he could do, except he did get some pay, but no food. He had employment, but it says he would have gotten down with the pigs and had some of the slop with him, except that really wasn't allowed. That brought him to his senses, according to this way of translating it. I think the more traditional one, when he came to himself. I think that's the same thing, and that brought him to his senses. And he said, all those farm hands working for my father sit down at 3 meals a day, and here I am starving to death. I'm going back to my father. And I'll say to him, and this is the speech, I've sinned against, Father, I've sinned against God, I've sinned against you. I don't deserve to be called your son. Take me on as a hired hand. And he got right up and went home. That's the first part. That introduces you to the younger son. What was his responsibility to the community where he came from? I'm not going to talk to you about your budget, because I was going to say I know nothing about it, but now I do. You did a lovely job of talking about that. And you were all engaged when we talked about that. There have been times when I've been in places, never named, where you mentioned stewardship and, well, you know what happens. That's what happens. That's not here. Congratulations. But the younger son left and thought he was walking away, perhaps forever. He had some money in hand, and this one translates it, he lived in dissipation and lost everything. That's one of the main characters. I have no doubt that there were other descriptions and conversations that took place after Jesus told his parables. Because people were like the 3 ladies that I mentioned earlier. Some of them said, well, what did that mean? What does it really mean? And what did you really want us to get? And I can imagine that he often said, did you listen? And left it there. There have been other people who would say, I love parables because I don't have to take them seriously. I think that's not right. I think that parables require you to listen and interpret and retell until they mean something for you where you are. Right now, you're very much, just a minute. I wondered what that was. It was gone by my feet. I was thinking twice as it would not be helpful. Right now, you are looking at what it means to be a beloved community, and I think you are. How do you keep it that way? How do you make it grow? How do you make it deeper? Well, if you've been away, coming back is a real experience. I pictured this younger son. He'd been slopping the pigs. He wasn't very clean. All apart from ceremonially clean, he wasn't very clean. My father would have said, well, that's because he didn't take good care of the pigs. He was from Missouri, and he raised the reserve grand champion hog for the Missouri State Fair. And what he did when he went to the fair was to get 2 stalls. One was for him to sleep in, one was for his hog to sleep in, and the gate was left open. He said, you know, pigs can be very, very clean. Well, not according to this story. And so I picture the younger son coming with terribly, terribly worn out sandals, trudging a distance in the heat. The heat has the Middle East can have it. Thirsty. And it says he said he was starving. He felt that way. And he was spotted at a distance. Now, it's really the third member of the story, the father who saw him coming and ran out and didn't let him finish his speech. Father, I've sinned against you. And his father said, I'm not listening. He threw his arms around him. He hugged him. He kissed him. And he brought him back to the spread, which is their farm. How big that was, I don't know. It's a parable. But he said to the people who worked for him, the old one says, kill the fatted calf. This one describes it as get a grain-fed heifer and roast it. Those of you who've been around farms, that means more than the fatted calf. And put clean clothes on him. I presume they let him wash first. But put clean clothes on him, put the family ring. Now, I didn't really come from a family that had a family ring. Did you? But you can guess what that means. It's the signature or the sign that you really belong. Well, some of you may say, well, that seems wrong. He'd already taken what his share of the inheritance was, and he'd gone off and he'd squandered it. He should not have a second chance. That's not what this story says. Part of being part of a beloved community is that you're spotted as we were as we walked in the door today. There's just a couple of you who are here, but you welcomed us. And we felt like we belonged. I've been here before. I've been here when you've had speakers, one who walked away from going to Iraq. Yes. I was here then. And we've been here other times. And so we feel at home here. But even if we hadn't, the people who greeted us first weren't people that we knew. Some of you we know. The Father kept community by welcoming the Son back. And we can talk a little bit more about the Father in a moment. But there's this other son. You know, I was the older brother, chronologically, in the family of my family of origin. I was very good. My brother was not nearly so good as I was. I pray that I do not follow in the footsteps of the older brother, because what did he do? You know the story. He would not come in and celebrate. I'm not having a part of that, not a bit of it. And then he said to his father, and this isn't fair to me that you are honoring your younger son. I have a friend, and she usually says it in jest, but it's all about me. You maybe know some people, and if you're around them, it really is all about them. That doesn't help the community. When the children are here, it's all about them for all the rest of us. When the choir sang, and by the way, it was lovely. When they sing, it's all about what they're giving to you as part of their beloved congregation or community. When you take on what we did at the bridge yesterday, you stand up and you say, there are things that are important, and inclusion is, excuse me for using the terms, inclusion trumps exclusion every time. I'm a terrible monster. I'm usually trying not to do it from the pulpit, but I'm not always successful. When you participate, when you reach into your community and out of your community into the wider community, you are practicing what the meditation called agape. Some of us are lovable. All of us, I think, are lovable. But some of us really try hard to demonstrate that we're not. Anybody like that? Are there times when you're like that? There probably are. You didn't meet Sandy much, but she has a wonderful way of letting me know when I have managed to reach that plateau. And one of our promises to each other when we got together was to speak the truth in love. And every once in a while, she'll say, you remember? I promised to speak the truth in love. This is one of those times, and I usually know what she means. The older brother was not going to get caught in that trap. Not in the least. I'm not going to soften. I'm not going to participate. You can come back. And why do they waste that heifer, that roast beef, that prime rib, whatever it was? Why do they waste that on somebody who's already taken what is due to them and squandered it? The older brother was as judgmental as you could get. And some of us have to fight that. Especially if growing up we did everything right. I could go to cases later. But if you grew up doing everything right, it's very easy to look at those people who aren't. Whether you're in, I used to call it grammar school, whether you're in elementary school, middle school, junior high, high school, college, it's always possible to look around and say, I am better. Now, there is a balance, and one that you do within your congregation, within your community, which says you need to love yourself before you can love anybody else. And that's really hard. Those of us who were raised with hierarchies that put ourselves at the very bottom find it difficult to say, you know, I'm a child of God. However we define God, I'm beloved. And being together makes a beloved community. It's nice that you're making a budget. I think that's lovely. But you're also working on accepting people wherever they are, and accepting yourself and knowing that you're a person of worth. That fits right into all the statements that I know of that you make within your community. And so the story of the prodigals is a prodigal that pulls all that he can take out of the community and leaves. But it doesn't stop there. And the prodigal that stays but misses the joy of being part of it. And finally, the father who prodigally loves, beyond the bounds, beyond anybody's judgment, who says to the younger son, welcome back. I don't condone what you did, but you are my son, let us celebrate. You are my daughter, let us celebrate. And he says to the older son, all I have is yours. And he didn't even know. And so he didn't have a party that who knew that he wanted it. He never told anybody. All I have is yours. That's part of being the beloved community. Amen. Our world is one birth.